everyone. Life can get a little crazy, so let's talk about it. If you're ready to dive deeper, talk about what really matters, and feel a little more empowered, then you're in the right place. I'm your host, Carley Doxtator. I'm a life coach, baker, dog mom of 2, and you're always there for you gal pal. And I'm so excited to have you join me. So grab your fuzzy socks, put on your comfy pants, and let's have girls' night. Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of Girls Night with Carley Doxtator. I can't believe there's another episode. I am seriously so excited and so grateful for how many downloads and how many different people are listening to it already. It still just feels so surreal that I get to do this and I get to share and learn with all these different people that I don't even know that I'm making an impact on. So that's just really great, and it's such a beautiful thing, but I'm really grateful for you guys. This episode, we are going to dive into empathy, and I think this is an important topic just because empathy is such an important part of our lives. And so in this episode, we are going to talk more about one, the difference between sympathy, empathy, and compassion. We're going to talk about whether you can run out of empathy, what that looks like, and things to help you through if you feel that you're there. So I'm really excited for this one because this is a really big topic that I feel like people don't really talk about the dark side of empathy all that often. They mostly talk about the bright side of it. So I'm excited to dive in. So I want to start the episode by defining the difference between empathy, sympathy, and compassion, because it's really easy to confuse the three, and people honestly use them interchangeably often, but they are different, and they're different in some pretty important ways. So very basically, you can think of the three in this way. Sympathy is understanding the emotion someone is feeling. Empathy is feeling that emotion alongside them. And compassion is the willingness to relieve the suffering of that emotion. So if you get nothing else out of this episode, there you go. There's a very, very quick synopsis of what those three are. But let's dive a little deeper. First of all, what is sympathy? Sympathy is basically saying that you care about and understand another's suffering. Sympathy has the least emotional effort and the least emotional involvement of all three. And further, we can feel sympathy for someone without feeling any empathy for them and without feeling any compassion for them. So an example of sympathy is like when you're on an airplane and you see a young mom with a little baby, and the baby is crying and she can't get him to stop. Sympathy says, man, that sucks. And that's where it stops. And so moving on to empathy, according to a definition by Lesley University, which all of the definitions, if you look online, are fairly similar. This is just one that I chose. Empathy is defined as understanding another person's experience by imagining oneself in the other person's situation. So what that means, you're feeling the feelings of the other person and you understand the other person's experience without actually doing the experience yourself. So if someone falls off a bike, you're feeling the feelings that they're feeling without you actually having to fall off the bike. And with empathy, there is a boundary maintained between yourself and the other person. The cool thing is when we feel empathy, there are actually mirror neurons in our brain firing off. So that's why when you see someone like slam their fingers in a car door in a movie, you instinctively flinch, grab your hand and cringe, and you're like, oh, that hurt. You know, those are your mirror neurons firing off. You didn't actually slam your fingers in the car door, but your body is reacting almost as if you did. So your brain is essentially seeing it happen to someone else and mimicking the response in your own body. Empathy, in other words, is putting yourself in another person's shoes and feeling what they feel or feeling what you would feel in the same situation. And empathy is actually a really beautiful thing. So empathy is a critical part of our experience as humans and a critical part of learning how to connect with other people. When you have empathy, you can better communicate with others, you can manage conflict better, and it's easier to get those new opportunities that everybody wants and everybody's looking for. And so an example of empathy, back to the mom on the plane, while sympathy says, man, that sucks, empathy says, hey, it's really hard flying on a plane with the baby. That feels really overwhelming and frustrating that he won't stop crying. So empathy is taking it a step further, and you're actually feeling those feelings of the overwhelm and the frustration alongside that mom. And what is compassion? Compassion is essentially taking your empathy and it's taking your sympathy a step further. So when you are compassionate, you are being sympathetic or empathetic first, and then you're doing your best to alleviate some of that feeling or that pain that the person is feeling. So with compassion, you're not running away from the feeling, you're not getting overwhelmed by it, nor are you ignoring the feeling. Compassion allows us to take a step back to see what the other person in front of us needs in that moment. So back to the example of the mom on the plane again, while sympathy says, man, that sucks, and empathy says, hey, it's really hard flying on a plane with a baby. That feels really overwhelming and frustrating that he won't stop crying. Compassion says, maybe I can help relieve some of the stress she's feeling. Maybe I could wave at and make faces at the baby so he laughs instead of crying. Or if you worked with kids a lot in the past, maybe it's offering to step in and hold the baby for a little while so the mom can take a nap. Whatever it is, it's essentially that next step of taking action to help the other person. So you can essentially think of compassion as empathy in action or sympathy in action. I think an important note too here is that you can feel sympathy without feeling empathy, and you can feel compassion at the same time that you're feeling sympathy and at the same time you're feeling empathy, but you don't have to. You can feel sympathy on its own or empathy on its own as well. I would say that, at least in my opinion, sympathy is the least helpful of all three, because with sympathy, we tend to try to put a silver lining around what someone is feeling. So say someone hasn't been into work for a while, one of your coworkers, and when they come back, they say, oh man, yeah, I got in a car accident. And your immediate response is, well, at least you made it. That's not helpful. And it kind of just puts the other person on guard too. Like, okay, but I got in a car accident. You understand that that's a big thing, right? And car accidents can be really traumatizing. On the other hand, empathy attempts to understand, and compassion addresses their needs and helps to lift some of the burden off of them. You can think of empathy as having a limited supply, and you can think of compassion as a renewable resource. So I like to think of empathy as water in your cup. You can have a really big cup, so it takes longer for it to drain, or you can have a really tiny cup, which takes not much at all. You can also, if you're starting to run out of water and you notice, you can go and fill it back up again, right? Compassion, on the other hand, is like the water coming out of the faucet. There's endless amounts coming through whenever you want it, and it's always there and always available. And while empathy is a really great thing and really helps to breed connection, the problem with empathy is that you can get stuck in it. So we can feel all these emotions and we can feel all this pain that doesn't even belong to us, and there's nowhere for us to put it if you don't know what to do with it. And if you keep going, even after you already feel emotionally drained, this is where, yes, you can, in fact, run out of empathy. And lots of times you will hear this being described as empathy fatigue. And it's really common among healthcare workers, first responders, counselors, therapists, and really just people who are taking care of others all day long. But it's not just them that can run out of empathy. All of us run the risk of running out of empathy if we're not taking care of ourselves and if we don't know how to take a step back from it. So that begs the question, what causes us to run out of empathy? And really what it comes down to is that empathy fatigue comes from overextending yourself for others on a consistent basis. Your body does not know the difference between a real or a perceived threat. So that's why when you think back on a painful memory, for example, your heart starts to race, or your chest gets tight, or your palms get sweaty. Because in your mind, the memory is real. The threat of the memory is real. And again, when you're empathizing with someone, mirror neurons are literally firing off in your brain, making you feel what they feel. That's what mirror neurons do. So when you are constantly feeling others' pain without taking a step back, you are putting your body through all of those emotions and all of those same physiological responses. Going through a traumatic event can also cause you to lose empathy. When you experience something traumatic, your body is in shock and it needs a bit of time to catch up and process everything that is going on. Studies have shown that people experiencing PTSD have impairments in their ability to process and to relate in social and relational settings. And further, people experiencing PTSD have shown to have a lower empathetic resonance. So I would like to point out that PTSD can happen to anyone. It does not just occur in veterans who have come back from war, although that is probably the most commonly talked about. You can get PTSD from experiencing a major car accident, for example, or a death of someone really close to you, etc., things along those lines. But interestingly enough, studies have also shown that on average, people who experienced a traumatic childhood tend to have higher levels of empathy as an adult. Either way, if you have gone through a traumatic event recently, you are likely running a little bit low on empathy. So let's go through some of the signs that you are running low in your empathy tank. And this is where things are actually really important for me and why it was really important for me to do this episode, because I got to a point where I really ran out of empathy. And so that's why I want anybody else who is struggling with this to know that you're not alone. There are resources for you out there, and there's other people going through the same thing. So the signs that you're running low on empathy: you're getting irritated at everything, big, little, it doesn't matter. For me, it was even as little as someone getting in front of me when I was driving. And to be clear, they were not even cutting me off in traffic. They were simply moving lanes. And I was sitting in my car like, fuck you. Like, how dare you get in front of me? You know, like, that's a really big sign. If you're getting irritated at really little things that really don't deserve your irritation, then that may be a sign that you are running low on empathy. You may also feel overwhelmed or hopeless or powerless. You could be getting angry at people or angry at little things that wouldn't normally bother you. You may be feeling exhausted all the time. And I know that some of these symptoms sound like symptoms of other things like depression or anxiety. So this is where you have to take some notes for yourself. And if it gets to a certain point, then maybe talk to somebody else about it. But feeling exhausted all the time, wanting to sleep a lot, but not being able to sleep is also one. Having a hard time sleeping, or just in general overthinking and having racing thoughts. Not being able to concentrate. So this was a big one for me. When I was in the depths of it, I was having a very, very, very hard time concentrating at work. I would sit at my desk. I work from home, which I have for years now, so that's not an issue for me. But I would sit at my desk and I would just not be able to concentrate on the work that I was doing. And I believe that it was because I was just really running low on all this empathy stuff, especially because being in sales, you need empathy, and you need a lot of empathy for yourself, especially because you're going through the day and you're getting told no, like constantly almost throughout the day. And you're dealing with people who are not the nicest to you sometimes because, you know, you're cold calling them and you're calling them out of the blue trying to sell them something. And not everybody takes kindly to that. But I was not able to concentrate and get the work done that I needed to get done. Another big one is using drugs or alcohol to just numb out. And I've said it in one of my previous episodes, but numbing out with drugs and alcohol is really, really not a good way to handle your emotions because, one, you run the risk of forming an addiction, which is really not good. And two, the longer that you just numb out your feelings, it doesn't make them go away. It just makes them grow stronger. So you're going to have to face them eventually. So it's better to face them sooner rather than later. Blaming yourself and being very critical of yourself, negative self-talk, and maybe you've worked on this, maybe you tend to be a little bit more negative, but if it just increases in intensity and the amount, then that's another sign that you're probably running low on empathy, because when you're running low on empathy for others, you are very likely running low on empathy for yourself. And this is a big one. You, quite frankly, just don't have the energy to care anymore. I got to this place when I was really deep in this, where I was like, I remember saying this to myself. I was like, man, I am really sick of caring about people. And I got to that place and I said it to myself and I was like, wow, like I should probably start looking into like what's going on, because this is not a place that I want to be, nor a place that I was used to being. But that is how I felt. I just did not want to care about anyone or anything anymore. And that is such a shame, because we as human beings are meant for connection, connecting with our inner worlds, connecting with each other, connecting with our pets and the world around us. We are meant to live these beautiful, vibrant lives, and the emotions that we feel, the whole spectrum of emotions, is such a huge part of that beauty. And if you're feeling like I felt, like you don't want to care, then your only option is to numb out. But it is not possible for us to numb out one emotion without numbing out the rest, because all of our emotions are so beautifully intertwined with each other. And the last one that I would add here is being hypervigilant on what everyone else is doing. And more specifically, being hypervigilant about how they are not showing up for you or what they are doing wrong. Hyper-focusing on everyone else is a big, big signal that you need to focus on yourself. Because the reason you are focusing on everyone else so much, what they're doing, where they're at, who they're with, why it's not you, is because you are avoiding focusing on something within yourself that you are scared to face. Sorry, I don't know if you guys can hear that. That's Kiwi's wagging her tail and it's hitting the ground. So if you can hear that, that's what that is. But anyways, if you've run low on empathy, that is okay. Do not fear, because there are things that you can do. And I understand that this is a really hard place to be in. As I was saying, I was just there. And what can make it even worse is when you're used to being such a kind and empathetic person, and now suddenly you feel like a total stranger to yourself. So my first tip to help gain that empathy back is to be gentle with yourself and give yourself a break. You do not need to be perfect all the time, and it is okay to go through periods where you feel like a totally different person. This is simply your body and your mind telling you that something needs attention. Remember, there is nothing wrong with you. There is just something wrong. So let yourself off the hook for a while and just float in the emotional pool that you're currently in. Next, I would say accept the bad days. Something that helped me when I was having a bad day or when something annoyed me, I kind of just accepted that was how it was going to be. So an example, I remember one day I woke up and everything was annoying me. Every little thing that didn't go perfect sent me down the spiral a little bit further. I had a hard time opening the OJ lid for my smoothie. I got irritated. Took longer to put on my shoes than I thought. I was fucking annoyed. And at a certain point, I just accepted that I was annoyed that day. And I said to myself, I'm feeling annoyed today. Every time that something annoying happened, I was like, wow, that was kind of irritating. And honestly, the second that I acknowledged what I was feeling, it instantly started to feel better. So I would do this if you're in the same situation. Acknowledge what you are feeling. Say it out loud if you need to say it out loud, or make the conscious effort to, if you can't say it out loud, if you're in a situation where you can't, say it out loud, say it in your head to yourself. Say, I am feeling this way today, and that's okay. And I would acknowledge it, and then I would take a deep breath, really deep breath, and I would just slow down. So maybe instead of cooking dinner that night, I would just order in, so I didn't have to worry about cooking myself or doing the dishes afterwards. Or maybe instead of cleaning the bathroom as you planned, you can just wrap up in a blanket on the couch and just veg out watching a movie instead. Most things are not so important that they can't wait until tomorrow when you have the capacity to do them in a more enjoyable way. Of course, there's exceptions. Don't neglect your kids. Don't do things that are harmful. But most things like cleaning the kitchen can wait, right? Most things like that can wait. And for me, this is a really big one. I actively gave myself permission to be a quote unquote bad friend. So what I mean by that, if I didn't want to go to an event, I gave myself permission to cancel, which old me never would have done, probably why I was feeling this empathy fatigue in the first place. If something they said bothered me, even if it was seemingly small or unintentional, which most times when people offend you, it is unintentional, I gave myself permission to bring it up, to talk about it, instead of just letting it fester and making the excuse of, oh, they must not have meant it. And if I didn't have the energy to respond to like a text, for example, I waited for a few hours or until the next day to respond. I gave myself permission not to answer immediately. And ironically, me giving myself permission to be a bad friend actually made me a better friend, because I was being more honest about how I was feeling, what I needed, and I wasn't building resentment towards my friends. It created a safer space for all of us, and one where I just felt like I was finally able to breathe and relax. Okay, on to the next one. Majorly focus on your self-care. I will probably talk about self-care a lot because self-care is so, so important, especially when you are feeling so run down, so overwhelmed, and like you've run out of empathy. Your body is begging for your attention, begging for it. So listen to what your body needs and do it. What also falls into this category is focusing on getting enough sleep. If you're having a hard time sleeping, maybe try going to bed earlier or giving yourself permission to sleep in late. Eating healthy foods that make you feel good and energize your body. There is evidence, which there's a really good book that I'm reading right now. It's called This Is Your Brain on Food. But it's by this girl, and she is a nutritionist and a psychologist. And she's discussing the connection between our gut and our brain. And the gut microbiome has a direct influence on our brain and our emotions and how we're feeling. So what you're eating is directly impacting your mood. So when you're eating those healthy foods that are good for you, you're also helping to improve your mood. And exercising. So move your body. It doesn't have to be an intense workout. Go for a walk if you need to around the block. Just do something to get those endorphins up. And start making better boundaries and sticking to them. It is okay to say that you don't have the capacity to help someone. It doesn't mean that you love them any less. But when you think of it this way, so let's say maybe your partner's friend passed away it is not helpful for them if you start going down a bad path too, because you can't help them if you yourself need help. It'll probably just make the situation worse, because at that point you guys are feeding off of each other's pain. One of the best things you can do for them is remain in a good headspace yourself. And one of the best things that you can do for yourself is to do everything you can to remain in a good headspace. That's not to say that you should neglect the emotions that you're feeling. Quite the opposite. You should address the emotions you're feeling. You should accept them, and you should understand what they're telling you. Because at the end of the day, all of our emotions are just signaling to us what's going on. But make better boundaries and stick to them. You don't have to be the martyr or the rescuer or the listening ear for everybody around you. And last but not least, I would say, I don't know if you can hear that either. That's Rufus grumbling at me. My puppies are being very active tonight. Sorry, last but not least, I would say focus more on compassion over empathy. So while empathy is more of a passive and automatic response, and it can be draining, compassion is active, it's deliberate, and it's regenerative. So as I said earlier, compassion allows us to take a step back from the empathy we are feeling and remove ourselves a bit so that we can actually help. Empathy and compassion actually light up different parts of our brain, and research has shown that compassion can actually combat empathetic distress. So compassion is allowing yourself to remove yourself from the emotion, but also still be there for the people that you love. And especially when you're in this vulnerable place yourself, that is the kindest thing you can do for yourself. So I think that's it. I would love to hear your guys' stories of if you were going through a hard time or moments where you felt this way and you got out of it. If you have any other tips for people, I would love to hear them and share them. But again, there's so many different things that you can do, and it is okay if you're feeling that way. If you're feeling burnout and run down and like you're out of empathy, it's okay. That's a thing that people go through, and there's ways to get yourself out of it. And you know what? I am actually going to include a few resources in the show notes. One including that video by Brene Brown that speaks about empathy versus sympathy. She does a really good job describing it. It's very succinct, I think it's about 3 minutes. If you haven't seen it yet, I feel like I've seen it like 600 times, but it's so good. So if you haven't seen it, then go ahead and look through it. And I'll include a few other resources as well. So that is it. Thanks so much, you guys. Love you. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed the episode. If you liked what you heard, then go ahead and subscribe so you get updates with us every week. You can also follow us on Instagram at KRC Coaching. If you're interested in working one-on-one, then go ahead and visit our website, krccoaching.com, to book your first 30-minute session for free. All right, thanks so much, you guys. Love you. Bye.